The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them.
Hi everyone, glad to be back here with you all. So I'm about a week late, apologies for that. It's been a little bit crazy in my life the last few weeks, the last couple months actually. Good stuff, learning a bunch, but just a little bit crazy time-wise. So I'm happy to have on again Ginni Sackett today. Now this woman, if you don't know her, master Montessorian. I mean, like the real deal. If I ever have a question that I for whatever reason, I just can't figure out, this is one of the very few, maybe 1 out of 3 that I look to for like, oh yeah, she'll have the answer, or she'll have something insightful to say. And I give her a ring. Now I'm happy I can call this woman, but that's not really the case with most people. So I'm happy to be bringing her to as many of you as possible. This episode is really focused on teachers, Montessori teachers for 2.5 to 6+ years old. So really the CASA classroom, but I do think others will gain from it, whether you're a parent, a teacher, definitely admin, thinking about the context of the classroom. So I hope everyone enjoys. If you want to know more about Ginni, you can go back to the first episode I had with her called Montessori Materials. I think that's the title of it, because I don't want to waste time going over her huge bio. I will say quickly, she's got like something like 40 years in Montessori, just a master. She taught in the classroom for over 10 years, headed her own training center out in Portland, Oregon, actually was the head of pedagogy or education for all of AMI Montessori, and that's Association Montessori Internationale. For those who don't know, that is the organization founded by Maria Montessori originally. So she's also a mother of, I don't know how many children, but like a handful of children, and I don't know how many grandchildren, so many. So this woman she's done a lot. I think she's also something like a 3rd degree black belt, so she kicks ass. All right, that is the short of it on Ginni Sackett. Maybe not the most professional bio I've ever given, but again, if you want the whole enchilada, as they say, go back to the original episode because we give that. Okay, so I'm actually rushing through this because I want to get to the meat, the content of our conversation, because Ginni offers so much. Now the topic, normalization, probably a little strange for, well, normal parents out there, because it's kind of like, what the heck is normalization? And even for a lot of Montessori teachers, it's a little confusing, that term. We're going to clarify all that. But hopping into this conversation, I think one way to look at it, if you're having challenges with children in your classroom, this is the episode for you. And if you are a parent or an admin or anybody really who deals with children, and you've thought of difficult behaviors or disruptive kids, or you've dealt with that, this episode is for you. And really, if you just want to learn about children and about us as adults interacting with them, this episode is for you. It's a good one, at least in my humble opinion. All right, I think that's enough. Let us get into it. Ginni Sackett, I'm excited to have you on again.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I thought let's jump immediately in. So it's you, maybe 25, 30, I don't know how many years ago, it's your first class or one of your early classes. You walk in thinking, oh, this is going to be amazing. You're excited. It's going to be beautiful. And what you've got is a bunch of crazy kids. And you're looking at, and you're looking around going, oh my gosh. So what do you do in that classroom?
Okay. Absolutely relevant. Could happen any year, but of course, the earlier on, the more likely. For me, I had 2 quotes from my own trainer, Rita Schaefer-Zehner, that always helped me stay a little focused. One was the quote, which was, interrupt the behavior, give them something interesting to do. Really valuable. Interrupt whatever's going on and just give them something interesting to do. Not as easy as it sounds, but that is definitely one of the pieces that has helped ground me in such situations. It means you have to come really prepared with a lot of activities planned, group activities, also for individuals, but mostly group activities. If it's a bunch of crazy kids, it's probably the whole group. And so you want to just like interrupt it. Sometimes you interrupt it by just gathering them all. Sometimes you can clap your hands. I mean, just do something that attracts their attention. And then you have something immediately ready to do. And if what you offered to do proves to not be interesting, then you just switch it up. It's never wrong. You just always are moving on. And so it's sort of a trial and error, emphasis on the error. And you just keep trying until you begin to build a repertoire of what children in that state will find distracting, interesting, whatever will attract their attention and give them a moment's focus. So that's, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I want to come back to a few different things there, like trial and error. But what's fascinating about what you said immediately is that it's just clear it's going to take time. I mean, that's no matter what you're going to do, there is no magical Ginni solution first year or whatever year. There's no poof and it changes overnight, right? Or
exactly. Well, the interesting thing is what I found is when I would really get myself in this state where I was really prepared, I really mean it, every day you have a long list of a whole range of group type activities. And I can go into that a little more later if you'd like, so that you're prepared for it. It's, you just like, for example, for the group, one of my favorites was to play the hokey pokey. Do you know that one, yes. Game? And so it's a simple and it's repetitive. And that was that kind of game. You just pull together, take a lot of them from their popular culture, from the culture of, historically, as well as for children. Unfortunately, today, a lot of children only learn these games through an adult, because this used to be that children taught each other these things when they had a lot more of that free stage. But with something like playing a game like the hokey pokey, it gets their attention. There's no prep, there's no props. You just get them. You say, hey, just stand here, look at me, do what I'm doing. And you start singing and you start doing it. And it's and I've never seen it not attract the majority of the children's attention.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, well, we're not here to play games, we're Montessori.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you want to get to real, sort of the archetypal Montessori, play your games now.
Yeah.
And to make it helpful, I was actually asked this recently in the AMI question and answer on social media about play. And play gets a really bad rap, especially by Montessorians, as if it's, some kind of wasted time. But I don't know if any athletes or musicians in the audience would say that playing their game or playing their instrument is, wasted time. Yeah. So, play is very purposeful. And with children's games, you see every game, you do the hokey pokey, and you will discover you have opportunities for focus, for concentration, controlling movements in very particular ways, following a particular logical sequence with repetition of those movements in that sequence, and you're creating social cohesion because everyone's pretty much following it the same way themselves. Yeah. Even if the game only lasts for 4 minutes, that's 4 minutes of what we might call a normalizing activity for the children.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because I know there's going to be some people, wait, hokey pokey again, like what we're supposed to be working on materials. And I think it's that universal or more holistic approach to children saying, yeah, this is a part of what we're doing, and play itself is not bad for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like if children have been playing games at these ages for time immemorial in all cultures, there's got to be some wisdom in there. There's got to be something that's attracting them to that experience. They're following rules. It's just, it's really, we don't understand. And just think about how many of those materials actually have the term game in their title in the Montessori system. Yep. I think Montessori, she saw how children play and she honored it with the word work. but it's still about, a focusing activity. And so and then what you do as especially the newer teacher is every time you get one of these activities going and it does provoke interest and the children do get engaged, that's your feedback. That's how you begin to get to know your children and what their interests are and might be. And you begin to then build on that and expand on it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I have a story I can tell from my own experience. And, sometimes we worry about what, our head of school might be thinking about what we're doing or, whatever. So I had a moment one day in the classroom, and for some reason, everything fell apart. And it fell apart in a very loud way. Voices and movements and furniture and dropping things. And I don't know what was going on. Beautiful thing is I don't have to know why, I just need to respond. So I just gathered everybody really quickly. I said, go stand on the line, everybody stand on the line. So we got everybody standing on the line. And then I said, let's stomp our feet as loud as possible. And they were like, whoa, yeah. And so we're all stomping our feet. And I said, I think we can be louder than that. And they're like, oh yeah, so we did it louder. And I said, let's do it really loud, louder even. And then I said, okay, let's stomp our feet the loudest we possibly can. And it was just, it was great. And in from the door comes my head of school. She runs in and she's like, what's going on? Is everything okay? And all of us, the children and I, we're like stopped completely in our tracks. And we're like, oops, this is, what's she doing? And I just said, we're exploring sound and we're doing loud, louder, and loudest. So I put it into the sensorial games. And she goes, okay, all right, everything's okay. And she left. And then we all looked at each other like, ooh, we really got caught there. And so then I said, let's stomp our feet soft, quiet. And so everybody's like, oh, soft. And I said, I think we could be softer than that and softer than that. And we just and then I said, let's stomp our feet so that no one even knows we're here. And now, can you see the control of movement of the group that has just enormous. I've just guided, and they did it. We're all like doing the motions of stomping, and there's not a sound. And then I just started calling names one at a time, and they all went back, and it was interrupted, and it didn't happen again for that day. So it's that kind of flexibility and resilience but you're not going to have that on your very first day of your very first year. You're going to build towards that.
And it just, the comfort to be able to shift what you did. And even just your story, it's fascinating because I've never thought about it. I've always thought of, okay, let's see how quiet we can be.
Oh yeah.
But it's interesting that we would move away from, let's see how loud we can be. But they're both just levels of noise, as you're saying, or sound. So it's interesting that, of course, we want to go to the quiet because we want this quote normalized, beautiful classroom, but it could be normalized and you go to, hey, let's see how loud we can go. But it fascinates me that you were able to shift so quickly. And I think it's hard to do that as a brand new teacher.
Yes. And I think that the clue there is, what were they doing? They were being loud. So I met them where they were.
Yeah.
And then we really went into that, took it way farther than they might ever have thought they were allowed to do in the room. And then we brought it to the soft, to the quiet, quiet, soft, and then no sound at all.
So let me just throw this out, since this topic we're going to be covering is normalization. So do you think of normalization as, I think a lot of people do, or I've heard that it's a quiet room?
Well, the interesting thing is, when most of the children, most of the time, are displaying the characteristics of normalization, it's a fairly quiet place, but it's not silent. There should be the sounds of life going on. They're living beings, and there are sounds that go with being alive, and there are sounds that go with being excited, or wanting someone to see what they're doing, or calling someone over, or there should be the sounds of life. It should be a lively. Now, like I said, when it gets into the really disruptive, unproductive, just sound for the sake of its own sake, then I want to interrupt it, and I want to bring it back with something more interesting, back to a more a calm. I think calm is a good word to use for an environment of children who are experiencing normalization. Is that it should feel calm and focused, but it should be. I mean, we all make sounds all the time, or our voices, but it shouldn't be like things being dropped on the floor or furniture being knocked over or really like hostile behaviors. Those would be indicators that no, we're not in the zone.
Okay. So maybe looking at it like that, it sounds like this kind of normal in the normalization. Like if I'm walking around the grocery store, I know what is the standard or what's the norm. And if somebody just started, tossing cereal all over the place, that would be abnormal. I mean, is that the way you look at normalization in the classroom, or, what is normalization to you?
Yeah. Okay. So it is interesting in English. We do have this little conundrum, I think, we have this word normal. We talk about the norm, and then we have our use of the term normalization. And the norm and normal isn't always the what I would recognize as a normalization in children. So really, normalization to me is just that the child and the children as a group are experiencing support for their optimal development at that time of life. And they're experiencing that support from the environment. So normalization comes from the conditions in the environment. And I like to think of it that way. I don't like to think of normalization in terms of, I'm not going to normalize the children. I'm not, I even sometimes, I try not to even say too much about normalized children. I think of normalization as a state of being. And it's about the child is aligned, they're in harmony with the powers for their development. Especially this is true in the first plane. It happens at all levels. We can have normal, those conditions for normalization for adults too. But when the child, it's like a liberation. And I guess we do have to think of it in terms of its opposite. A word I don't like to use too much, just because it can be misunderstood. But Montessori is translated that she used the term deviation as the opposite of normalization. But deviation sounds really horrible, but if it just means off the path, de via in Latin.
But you don't tell parents like their kids are deviating?
No, I actually try to not tell them that they're normalized either. But it just means their behaviors are such that they're not experiencing the conditions to support them in their development, in their environment. And what children will do, and the younger the child, the more sort of unconscious this is, obviously, is they create very logical defenses because there are obstacles in their environment that are preventing them from following the directive of the powers for development, whether it's, in this case, the absorbent mind, the sensitive periods are telling them, do this, do this, do this, and the environment is not allowing them to do it.
So can you give me because it sounds good, and I know this kind of abstractly, but what would that look like in practice for teachers out there wondering, or if they've probably seen it and they don't put a name to it? Like, what does that look like? As an example, maybe.
Well, I mean, like deviations?
Yeah. In the classroom.
So in the classroom, well, a lot of times what we meet is, this is when we first meet a new child in our environment. This child comes with their, unfortunately, usually has defenses quite intact because they've already spent 2.5, 3 years battling this situation. So a child who is prevented from following, for the most part, then they will create these defenses. They could look like oppositional defiance. They could look like timidity and being very afraid. They can look like being loud. It's like whatever it is that they detect somebody wants them to do, they'll do the opposite. They'll cry easily. They'll use crying as a way to get their way. So it's those kinds of deviations. There's no end, I think, to the ways that these defenses can show. And that's what I like to call them, by the way. I like to call them the child's defense, because they're defending themselves against the obstacles that they're encountering in their environment. And of course, we know as Montessorians that often the biggest obstacle are the adults, because the adults control the environment. So when you have that, go ahead.
I want to ask you something, because it's interesting that you're raising all sorts of different children, and not just the ones that are pushing or throwing things and being loud, but even you noted like a shy child. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating to me, because I think with many teachers, if you haven't reached the kind of Ginni Sackett level of knowledge of Montessori, knowledge of children, the normalized child is the child who's kind of doing what he should be doing. And that could be a shy child, as long as they're not, making a mess of things. So mm-hmm. I remember a child in elementary school that I never thought about it, because this is my very early days. And he, quote, A student doing amazing work and so forth. And one day his mom came up to us and said, I've noticed that my child's just spending 2-3 hours at night anxiously studying. Oh. But all we saw was this wonderful child in class that knows all the answers, does a bunch of, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting that you raise that, because there could be a, quote, deviated child or not normalized child that might look like, because they're pleasing the teacher.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. It was one of the big revelations to sort out in my own work, was that even the child whose behavior would seem to be like very compliant and obedient and going along could actually be a very profound defense on this child's part, or deviation. That it's not about, it's not ours to do, ours to decide. If they're acting in a way that is, we don't even have to know the source either, by the way. Montessori says we do not have to know the source of these defenses. All we have to do is what we do normalize is we normalize the conditions so that the child can be liberated from this. But she talked about weak deviations and strong deviations. And many of the weak deviations is what you're mentioning, like, shyness, or they're really quiet, or they're reticent, or they're afraid, or they're afraid to disrupt anything. They've already had really, really harsh feedback in their life that if they get disruptive, bad things happen. As opposed to the strong deviation, where they're like, I don't care what you're going to do, I'm going to fight back. She actually said it was more healthy, it was easier to actually work with the child who has that strong, overt reaction. And deviation, whereas the weak deviation can get really lost. And she also talked about it as the child who hides behind the wall. They build a wall around themselves. And that child can also appear to be very, oh, thank goodness, compliant. And but actually that child is hiding. And then there's other children who flee, who just run away from it. So anyway.
What I love talking with you, Ginni, is because you're even the idea of mentioned defenses, which I don't hear a lot in Montessori conversation, because I think you have a pretty good grasp on psychology in Montessori. And when we think about this and the way you're talking, clearly it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I know adults like this. Or maybe I have an aspect of this in myself that I don't like, that I want to get rid of. So this isn't just about children. So when we see the larger picture in the work that we're doing, and how, it really has an amazing impact, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm ready to go. How do you hold on to that view of, I'm helping this child because he's got a deviation, or he's acting out because of something that we don't know? But when you walk into the classroom and it's just like, oh, I don't know what to do, and this child just yelling how do you get yourself out of that in the moment feeling where you're just like, I want it all to stop, and get back to that deeper sense of, man, there's a lot of work to be done. And these children they want to do good work. They want to enjoy themselves, but they're deviated in this sense. how do you get to that more profound outlook on children when in the moment? And I know a lot of teachers out there and parents, it's like, I just want to break, you know?
Well, that's a very logical response on our parts, but I think we have to let go of that and recognize it for what it is, which is our own. That's our problem. I would say that's my problem as the adult, because that's not why I'm here. Montessori called normalization the single most important result of our work. It's why we are here, particularly in the first plane here. We are here to help children. They have a second chance, especially between the ages, let's say 2.5 and 6. They have a second chance to sort of reset, they recalculate, as Siri likes to say, or whoever it is that gives us directions in our cars. They can let go of it. If these defenses continue into the later stages of development and into adulthood, they will become the characteristics of this person's personality. They're typically antisocial. They're typically, we all suffer from this. And so from these behaviors in others, and it's good to recognize them in yourself too. But this is our chance. This is why we're here. And I think, one of the things that I came to one day was to realize that when we complain that only non-normalized children come to our environments, we're like a doctor who's complaining that only sick people come to our office. We're here to help them. And so we have to just get past it and say, this is not about my comfort. My comfort will be in helping these children. The thing that what I wanted to say a little earlier was that, from your question, was that I have, in my career, I was always amazed at how quickly things turned around when I came with this approach. We're just here to play. We're just here to enjoy ourselves. I'm here to figure out what's interesting to these children, connect them to it. And then, and if that's a game, if that's everybody eating snack together, if that's going outside together, if that's, everybody making a huge ruckus on the line, whatever it is, one of the benefits of that is I can get calmer too. Because instead of, I'm not fighting the children myself, I am with them. We're kind of going with it. But I have this higher purpose in mind about where I see this going. I'm not going to stay here. This is not going to be our life together. And you have to trust that the children intrinsically want the calm of normalization. They want the focus. They want to clear the path from these defenses and get busy with their development, with their life, with their language, their movements, their, the intellectual development, the imagination. They want that. They can't tell you that, but they do want it. And you trust that. If you understand the developmental, powers of the children, you trust that. And your job is just to remove the obstacles that are in the way. So I know it sounds too easy.
No, I know that I'm listening to it and I'm like, I know this is true. I know this 100% true. And in my view, the single most important thing is for us to be in a state of relative normalization as ourselves, as adults, because children absorb who we are and the things that we do. So I think, and I don't want to sound like new agey. It's not like they're like, oh, if you're peaceful, then the children will automatically be peaceful. But if you bring that energy into the classroom of you're scared of what your head of school is going to think about what's happening in here, or am I really a great teacher? Which, I mean, all these different things that we have baggage, the heavier that baggage is, the harder the classroom might end up being.
Absolutely.
So I really respond to that and resonate with that. And then, of course, I mean, if you don't know anything about Montessori, that's going to be a massive, massive problem too, even if you have this great personality. So obviously not discrediting that, but just this sense of I'm coming in this classroom to enjoy myself and help these children to enjoy themselves and develop. And that feeling is so huge. But Ginni, on those days when you're just not feeling it, what do you recommend that the number one thing would be to get your own self into that state, maybe meditate, or maybe just take a few breaths? Or do you recommend, like I think in one of the, I had read a course of yours. It's just insane. It's so brilliant on normalization. You talked about, stripping down the whole room in your early days. Like, so there's no materials. Like, do you go towards the practical, oh, let me make some changes here? Or do you go towards the internal, let me help myself out? Because that's really what's wrong here. Like, where do you go?
Well, ideally, you're going in both places. But you have to start with yourself. That's why so much of like our AMI training is so much about the development of the adult, and finding out where your own prejudices and your own assumptions are that that you don't question, what your understanding of what a calm classroom should be, or what how children should be. So the working on ourselves is constant. And I used to do a thing where it was like, before I walked through the door in the morning, before the children were even there, I would pause, and I was like, I wanted to just the same way that I took my coat off, I want to leave everything at that door. I want to leave my life, my family, my concerns, everything. They're all going to be there. Believe me, when you walk out that door, they'll all be there waiting for you. But when you just go in, you go in, and I say, I'm in this present moment. That's where the children live. That's where I'm going to live. I'm in this present moment, and I'm just going to respond. I'm going to observe and see what's going on, and I'm going to respond to the best of my ability. And when and I'll see what works. And I know that we have this sense of being judged, and unfortunately, that can also be very real. A head of school might be, watching to see how the person is doing, but what I found was that when I would talk to my head of school and say, this is my strategy, this is what I'm doing, bring them into it, they were, usually very, very willing to respect that. But so there's, yes, yourself and breathing, even in the most chaotic state, unless someone is, if somebody's hurting, you got to go right away. You've got to interrupt that. You've got to separate that. But even if it's just like I was saying, the example of the noisy classroom, step to the side for just 30 seconds, breathe, and really look at what's happening. Who's doing what? Who's instigating what? Is it all the children? How are other children responding? And having these and planning, having these plans in place of, a whole list of all kinds of games. And you can get them from our work, especially with language, with movement. So you have this, and then you feel more confident. I just have to look at my list, or I know what, I have some ideas. And if it doesn't work, I know I can just switch it up. Nothing's ever going wrong. You just change it. So that part. And then the other part of it is, what is best for these children? Eventually it's going to be, literacy and mathematics and development of abstractions. And it's going to be all that wonderful, wonderful stuff, but they're not going to be able to take advantage of that until they are experiencing the conditions of normalization most of the time. So you have to trust that. I think there's a lot of trust involved. Trust the children, trust yourself, trust your method, trust, your training. And then be creative. It's like, it's great. We don't have to follow a syllabus because it's Thursday morning at, 8:00. We don't have to do anything then.
Yeah. And I want to, it's interesting that last point. I've seen some of the best classes I've been in. And I think when I was at my best with children is when you could be spontaneous. And it's kind of like, Maria Montessori called this a casa. Like in your house, if you had your children with you, it wouldn't be like, oh, well, we have to do this right now. I'd be like, oh, let's go bake a pizza.
Yeah.
And it's very, I found this to be weird it's a classroom, it's very formal. And I found this to be weird with adults generally, is that when we're in certain settings, we've just got, I don't know if it's baggage or what, where it's like, let's say you're going to give a talk and all of a sudden we become this formal presenter, and it's like, well, why is that? And why does the classroom have to be a quote classroom instead of like, oh, it looks like the children need a little song. Let's jump into a song. I found that the best teachers, when I'm at my best, you're spontaneous, you're able to be flexible. And as one thing that you said that jumps out, and I think in one of the sessions of your course, you quoted Montessori as saying, we must wait and observe. And it's so important, but it does get lost in those days when it's chaos. So maybe real briefly, how did you ensure that you were breathing, observing, and continue to have that kind of scientist or experimental mindset where it's like, even if it's something goes wrong, oh, I just learned something. That's good, because now I learned something about the children or about myself or about this whole environment. Like, how did you maintain that perspective during the more chaotic or crazy days?
Well, it does grow. So I think having realistic expectations of ourselves, not just realistic expectations of what the children are capable of, but of ourselves. And when, observing and waiting is a little dangerous to say at this stage, because how long do you wait? Like if it's something that you need to be there. Like I observe a child hitting another child, I can't wait. I can't go, oh, I wonder what technique he's going to use to hit him. It's just like, I've got to be there. I've got to act. So observing is something we're doing constantly, and we don't do it with just our eyes. We do it with all of our senses, with our interior. We're constantly at work that way. It is the most important task we have, this observation. And to say that we don't have time for it is to really be misleading ourselves. It is the only thing we should have time for. And that's because it's the only way we can decide how to act. I'll give it a little example. This is for an individual child, but I had a young child, brand new, and I had the bead cabinet full of beads, which I learned to not do in the first few days of the year, because it's just.
But you need the beads in the classroom, Ginni. What's going on?
They'll be there. They'll be there. But anyway, this child, she was just pulling at them and throwing them back at the cabinet, and this happened to be a very old set of glass beads, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to break. This is horrible. What do you do? So I observed and I see, okay, what is she doing? In a matter of seconds, you have to be able to say, she's interested in the beads. What is it she's doing? Is she interested? Is it the sound they're making when she throws them back at the cabinet? Yeah. Is it the colors? Is it the shininess? Is it the whatever? I don't know which it is, but she's interested in the beads. And so I went to her and I said, wait, this is, come here. And I went over to the multiplication bead bars, which is, full of books. And I got a little dish, and I started putting samples of each of the bead bars in it. So this little bowl was full of all of the different bars from 1 to 10. And then I just took her over to a table and I said, you can sort these. Now we know 2-year-olds love to sort things. They do it all the time. So I just said, you can sort these. And I started and I said, oh, this one and this, and oh, this one's just like this, and then she was immediately riveted. She was just like, and I just walked away, and she spent, quite a while just sorting all of these beads. Now, what is she doing? She's fulfilling something she was interested in. Its color, its length, its preparation for the mathematics activities. And she's calm. She's focusing. She's controlling her movements. She's not interacting. She was having a normalizing event. Mm-hmm. And that was, and then from that time on, I always had a box of bead bars ready for new children to, if they showed, exceptional interest in the math bead bars, that's what I took them to.
So and I think I heard you live tell that story a few years back, because it stayed with me. Oh yeah. And I think one of the challenges, now I've gotten pretty good at this, but it's taken years. But one of the challenges I find, and it still will slip into the problem, is that let's say she's throwing one of these bead bars before or dropping it. There's the tendency, almost the natural, I don't want to say natural, because some people are very good at it, to walk over and be like, no, we don't do this. Versus what you did is you looked at the environment, looked at the child, and you kind of said, oh, look, and you redirected into a positive way that led to focus. How do you have a kind of a principle around that? Or how do you do that so it's not you're the nagger in the classroom, or if you're a parent, you're the nagger at home? Like, how do you handle that?
Partly you learn it from experience, because if you discover what happens. But if one of my personal rules became, say no as rarely as possible. Like, just don't say no. No will spark defenses. No will spark opposition. So my no, my stop, will even to say stop, and to do it in that way will trigger defenses. And that is not where you want to go. It's not going to be productive. But what I wanted to focus on was what you could do. What's the yes here? So how can I get to yes with this behavior? And it's like it's practical too. This is not philosophical. This is not about, like, oh, we never say no. You save no for when you realize hitting, hurting, that's a no.
Yeah.
That is not acceptable here. But then you still have to redirect. You can't just expect them to, oh, you said no, so I'll stop. Again, at this early stage, that could be the absolute trigger a child is unconsciously waiting for it to really launch his or her defenses at you or at the environment.
Yeah,
so
you're saying that, Ginni. I wonder, I'm curious how you respond to this, but let's say, it's lunchtime, a child is playing with the food. They know that after maybe 3 or 4 days, it's clear that you don't play with your food. Are you okay with saying, oh, it looks like you're done with your food, we're going to put that away now, and then allowing the tantrum that ensues and so forth? Or do you have a different perspective on this?
I have a middle ground on that. I think I'm a firm believer in natural consequences and logical consequences. So a logical consequence can be you've stopped eating. I'm assuming you've had enough. And so it is time to put this away. And I like that phrase, it's time to, or let's put this away now. But one of the advantages of not absolutely saying no is if the child then protests and says, no, I do want to eat. It's like, oh, well, what do you want to eat next? What are you eating next? What are you eating first? And so you see if they're sincere, so to speak, in wanting to eat more. But there comes a point where if the child doesn't, then I'll say, okay, well, then I'll put it away. I'm going to put it away for you. And yes, they might tantrum. They might have another, I don't want to spark that. I will get to learn how individual children respond when I come in and sort of support consequences. But I also have to make sure that they understand that that's a consequence. So we've got to be doing our etiquette, so to speak, our grace and courtesy for eating and where your food is and where you are when you're eating. And we practice that in the mornings when there is no food or when there's, you practice it so that when you then say, oh, remember, we eat while sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
It's like, and I can say remember because we've all practiced it before. Let's all practice how we sit in our chair when we eat. Let's all, it's that whole grace and courtesy approach. We practice it. And so it becomes like, oh, this is the standard for behavior. And then, you're just reminding them. But this is our work in the beginning. That's why you mentioned it briefly, but I of the school that you do not fill the shelves for the first day of school.
Yeah.
You have a few sample things out. If you have returning children, you do think about what those children. So what would they be looking for? But having everything out on the shelves is very overstimulating, I think. It tempts people. What's in here? What's in here? What's in here? And so just having, very modest, very, the shelves are calm. They're not over full, and so it's all of a piece that, and I just also have to say this balance between taking care of myself, training myself and responding to the children, that is going to look different for every teacher, just the same way that every child's behaviors have that unique element of who that child is as a human being. We each will find our own balance for that.
Yeah.
So there's no carbon copy here for the children or for the teacher. Each of us has to find our own way.
Yeah, and I'm happy you just said that, because I think this could veer off to like, well, this, this sounds so beautiful. And I think it is possible. I've seen it be possible. At my best, I can get to this level, but there are moments when it's not going to look like this and it's not going to feel good because you've got, I think Montessori has this quote, there's nothing worse than having this ideal version that's impossible to meet. That's not the exact quote, but something very similar. So I'm happy you just raised that, because I think at the end of the day, we're going to have those moments where we're not observing, where we got a little bit too stern with the child. But I think just like the children, there's always tomorrow. And I don't know if Montessori has something about apologizing, just that it's okay to even say sorry to a child. Oh, I overreacted there.
Absolutely. So, you have to, because for one thing, it's the truth. If you in fact have overstepped your own bounds, your own proper authority, but also it's fantastic modeling, and they can see, oh, if you overstep, you this is what you do. You say you're sorry. You, however you play that out. I think that's really important. And you also will learn from that yourself. That's how you will learn. I will never respond to a child that way again. I will never say that particular phrase to a child again, especially if you can see that they are truly hurt. They burst into tears because of what you said. That's how I learned several things that I apparently carried in my own unconscious from my own childhood. And then it came out, and this is another thing my trainer said, in the moment of stress, we fall back on our earliest models. So, one of my earliest models was a teacher saying, how dare you, around a behavior. And it came out. And it came out, a boy who was very clumsy, and he had broken several things already in the first, few days. And he breaks one more thing. And I just had it. And I just went over, and I did get down on, his eye level. So I did that part. But I just said, how dare you break things in here? And he just looked at me, and he felt the energy. It was more than the words. And he just burst into tears. And I said, I am so, so sorry. I did not want to say that. I should not have said that. I do not want you to feel that way. That was wrong of me. I mean, I kind of talked that way. And then he calmed down, and we were friends again. But you know what? I never said that again. So sometimes we need that experience also to convince ourselves.
I wonder, I know in my own life, it was by my early 30s when I realized I don't like this part of myself. Like, if you yelled at the child and it's one thing to say, I'm not going to do that again. And then I know with you're digging into it. You're like, well, where's that coming from? When you do that work, and it becomes, even when something that kind of abrasive and that jarring to us, that, wow, that just came out of me.
Yeah.
It's painful in the moment to be like, what did I just do? But then it's an opportunity to go, well, what's going on inside me?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be probably the biggest game changer in my whole life, is when I was able to confront anything and everything, as painful as it is, because it's not fun to look at yourself and be like, oh, I don't like that about me, and then do the work to change it. But that was probably the biggest game changer in my whole life, because now I'm not afraid to see anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the gift the children give us. They bring us into their present moment. They bring us into this absolute honesty and, no artifice. And so if we're willing to go there with them, there are days I left, and you may have heard me say this before too, I say it a lot. There are days when at the end of the day, I went, well, the person who learned the most today was me.
Yeah.
And I got paid for it. How's that? But
how wonderful is it? When you can, I'm trying to like bring this back to those moments when it's just like overwhelmed. I just know when I interact with teachers, head of schools, that's the big thing. The big thing is just the overwhelm. Now I can smile, I can enjoy even the most, like 10 years ago, I would have been like so upset and like, it's going to take days to get over it. Where now I can be like, oh man, this is exciting. I can learn from this,
Yes.
But it's a process to get to that point. So I think what you're offering and what I found from you is just that you've got such a combination of like giving us the abstract of like what might be going on at these deeper levels and so forth, but also, hey, here's something you can do. Because even you're saying clean out the room, like well, the ideal room has to have all these beautiful materials from day one, and the parents won't see it. And, there's a lot of sales thing going on,
Yes.
So it
Yes.
takes a lot of courage and a lot of just, I'm going to be real with these children to take the bead cabinet out day one, when, but a lot of parents going to come in, they're going to be looking for that bead cabinet, So do you suggest having these? I mean, I think you said with the head of school, but just as a school or as a teacher with your colleagues, like having these discussions so that it's not this like, well, why did you take that out of your classroom? Or, or with the parents even to have the discussion, like, or do you hold off and you're kind of doing your thing until an issue comes up? Or how do you deal with that practically as a teacher?
Oh, good question. So, sometimes we learn how to deal with it practically when it surprises us. Something comes up that we didn't anticipate, but we do want to try to anticipate as much as possible. I was just thinking, usually the teacher's not alone in the room. Usually there's at least one assistant. And I think one thing is to really bring whoever's in the environment, whatever adults are in the environment, really bring them into partnership so that they know what your scheme is, what your plan is. You're in charge, you're devising the plan, but they have a role in it. And I think, and I do, for want of a better term, I do subscribe to the divide and conquer kind of approach, where like my assistant would take the real rowdies outside, if you have that kind of access, while I stayed in with some of the calmer children and got a few lessons in. And then we would switch, and then she would bring in a few others. And so, you sort of have this in and out kind of rhythm, so that you can have some individual one-on-one with some of the children. But working in partnership, bringing people in, helping them see that you're not just flailing. You have a plan, and that's why you need to have a plan. You have to over plan. You have more plans than you possibly do, but it gives you a lot of options. And also for the parents is a little more intriguing, because we won't want to communicate that there's anything wrong with their children, so to speak, or with their parenting. Frankly, that's not very productive either. That's for your parent nights, where you can sort of objectively look at how adults create obstacles for their children in their home. But in the terms of this, having not arrogance, but having the confidence to say, I am working to the best of my ability to implement what I learned in my own training, my own teacher training. And I am learning from it, and I will, I'm going to get better at it. And every day is a new day, and these children don't hold grudges. They typically don't come in remembering everything that didn't go well. But what they can do, if we keep this confidence and this positivity, they will learn that they can trust us. And that's why apologizing is important. That's why naming things for what they are is very important. A child once called me a horrible, horrible name that I can't say on your podcast. And I was like, where did you learn that? It's like, no, it involved the F word.
Oh, okay. I thought it was some unique name for you.
No. He was really mad at me. And I, of course, I'm like, I'd never had a child address me that way, and with that much like venom, he really meant it, I was like, where did you experience that? But anyway, I just looked at him and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to have a response like right now. And out of my mouth came, my name is Ginny, and that's what you can call me. And he just looked at me and was like, oh, like he sort of was startled back a little bit, and he went, oh, okay. And then he walked off, and then that became a grace and courtesy lesson for when someone calls you a name you don't like. So it's that kind of a rhythm that staying in the present moment, staying alert, staying with who is in front of you, what is happening in front of you. Trust, if you are attuned to that, if you are observing and responding, you can't just observe, you have to observe and respond. The other quote that my trainer shared with us came from her trainer, which was, you are not responsible for what the children do. You are only responsible for how you respond to what the children do. And that was another really great maxim for me, was like, I'm not responsible for how they're acting, but I am responsible for what I do in response to it. And I need to respond. And I respond with their best interest at mind, not mine, not some illusion of the perfect Montessori environment. What is actually needed right now? What's going to be the best support and service to these children? That's what I'm here for. I'm the doctor. Montessori said normalization was a cure.
I like that quote with the doctor, because it's like, I say this a lot to teachers, but like, there are not many teachers like flip out or get really worked up on a child for like the math. He's lagging a little behind in math. But if the behavior is lagging behind, which is just a part of somebody's whole person, then that's like, whoa, we got to get back. But you wouldn't do that necessarily in the academic realm. You wouldn't be so judging of the child in that realm, but in the behavior realm, I think it's connected to, well, a child doing, a little bit less than maybe you think he should in math, he's still calm. He's not throwing stuff around the classroom,
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, I think.
Yeah, but I think where the child is, honoring where the child is now, and having that vision of where the child could be. That's the other thing Montessori told us. When we receive these children from day one, we see the child who is not yet there, she said. And if we understand the characteristics and the joy of the characteristics of normalization, that's the vision we have to have. Every child in here has that capacity. And I've never had, I will say twice, I had to ask for a child to leave my environment over all the years that I was in the classroom. And they were both really difficult, but they both were situations where either I could not get the parents to really work with me in terms of the behaviors. And you had mentioned the parents, and on an individual basis, there are times when the partnership with the parents needs to really be enhanced. We are always in partnership with parents, but sometimes having sort of aligning our responses in the home environment with what's going on in the CASA environment is really essential. But no matter what their abilities, I know I had children that today would probably have all sorts of diagnoses in terms of their attention, et cetera. But you find, who is this child?
Yeah, meet them.
Yeah, meet them where they are, and then have the vision of where they can be.
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a lot here today, both, it's kind of this uplifting feeling about children and adults, and then some really, here's what you can practically do in the classroom and even at home. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of parents listening, and you can definitely gain from the same approach at home. Is there anything else that you think, I know we've covered a lot, that you want us to kind of slip in there at the end, or do you feel like, hey, no, I think we got a lot here. Like,
well, we certainly did get a lot, kind of roamed all over, but I would just like to come back to the word fun. That if you're not having fun with these children, this gift of these children, then reroute your thinking, like, what is it your intentions are? That having fun is key to helping children let go of their habits of defense. And it's a lot easier on us than being stressed and strained and judgmental and fearful for ourselves. But if you're having fun, even just a little bit, like, what was the fun thing at the end of the day? Say, write down 3 things today that were fun.
Yeah.
And see if you can increase that number. Fun also helps the children realize that they don't need those defenses here. They don't need them with you. They can trust these adults. They can trust this place. And we can all just relax and enjoy our time together. That would be my biggest.
I love it. And, Fred Rogers, a big hero of mine, said, let children see you doing things that you enjoy, or that you're having fun. And so I love it. I love it. I love that you don't end with like, keep in mind the duty that we have to these children. It's kind of like, okay, let's everybody just chill out and have some fun.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, Ginni.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Okay, coming out of this episode with Ginni Sackett, I've got a couple things. I'm definitely not going to try to summarize in a few points what was discussed, because I think with this discussion, it's probably one of those that you just want to, grab a glass of wine or a beer or some grape juice, whatever you drink out there one night, and just take it all in. I know I'm going to come back to this episode. It's got a lot to offer. But I wanted to just note two things. One is, if you appreciated this conversation, please, please, please leave a review. If you're on Apple Podcasts or you're on YouTube or Facebook, wherever this thing is shared, say something. It's definitely super helpful on Apple Podcasts because their whole rating system and so forth. And then note, if you liked this particular episode, say, hey, Ginni is just incredible. I enjoyed her so much. Put some details in it so we get that feedback and know what's good. And if you don't like something, write me personally. We don't need you writing 1 star and be like, oh, this sucks. Write me personally. I'm always taking feedback, positive or negative. Okay. The other thing is, I mentioned, I think a couple times, Ginni's course that I took, and that is actually not a course that's available. So I'm talking with Ginni about possibly making it available because it was so powerful for me. She shared it with me. And I think a couple other people that were live for that course, or more than a couple, I don't know how many were there, but they just continue to tell her of how much value it was. And I think it was, well over a decade ago that she gave it. So anyways, look out in the future for the potential of that coming out. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Okay. Thank you to everyone out there for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's fun doing it. It's a lot of work, but make it happen. So take care, everyone, and adios for now.